They were trying to bully American citizens. They're threatening them with fines. They're threatening them with imprisonment. Ofcom started sending stupid letters to American companies in February of this year. $10 million per threat. So in 4chan's case, 6 letters, 6 threats, $60 million. Ofcom attempted to assert its authority over 4chan, and 4chan told Ofcom to go to hell. The sending of these letters and the purporting to have authority over American speech was a grave threat to American civil liberties, and I was given the mandate and instructions to wage war on the Online Safety Act and destroy it, and that is what we are in the process of doing.
Preston Byrne, thank you for joining us on the Guido Show. Could you just start by explaining why we're here? Because what is really going on with 4chan, you guys, and Ofcom?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a broader thing than just 4chan. Basically, the United Kingdom's Office for Communications, Ofcom, started sending stupid letters to American companies in February of this year. I was instructed to represent every single one of those recipients of those stupid letters. And my mandate was to essentially, I mean, these letters aren't enforceable in the United States, right? Ofcom has to go over and domesticate them here, and that's never going to happen because of the First Amendment. And so my clients retain me. I'm working pro bono. And the mandate, of course, because there's not really a whole lot to defend, it's just they send the letters, we ignore them, was that we recognize that the sending of these letters and the purporting to have authority over American speech was a grave threat to American civil liberties. And I was given the mandate and instructions to wage war on the Online Safety Act and destroy it. And that is what we are in the process of doing.
So with 4chan specifically, they were fined £20,000 this year by Ofcom via the Online Safety Act almost as soon as it was implemented. And Ofcom, or rather 4chan, are refusing to pay. I understand that. So where are we with that? You're still in the midst of that battle as well, specifically.
I mean, it's not really a battle. Ofcom attempted to assert, it's not really a battle. Ofcom attempted to assert its authority over 4chan, and 4chan told Ofcom to go to hell. And so Ofcom is going through its own internal procedure, rather like a game of kabuki theater, where it's play acting to have the ability to enforce this law against American citizens. And we're just kind of, I mean, I sent them a Pepe meme yesterday in response to one of their emails. We're just having fun at this point. We're doing it for the lulz. And we're also doing it because we're caught every time an Ofcom communication crosses the American border. Within 60 minutes of transmission, right, it's in my inbox, I usually receive it, and then within 5 minutes of my having completed a review, it's in a dozen government inboxes at state and federal level here in the United States. So every time Ofcom does something, it's immediately visible at multiple levels of American state and federal government. And so please send more. You're making the case. Ofcom really is making, honestly, send more. Send as many emails as you want. Because what Ofcom is doing is they're trying to bully American citizens. They're threatening them with fines. They're threatening them with imprisonment. We have been really clear, and until very, very recently, we were fairly professional about it. But now it's just getting so ridiculous that we're responding with memes. That we've been really clear that this stuff isn't enforceable here. If Ofcom wants to have a discussion about enforcing an Online Safety Act fine, there's a really easy way for them to do this. They can go use an international service convention, service properly, bring a case in a U.S. court, try to enforce the fine domestically, and then we'll have a conversation in front of a U.S. judge. They wouldn't do that, right? So what we had to, because it's a giant intimidation racket, and so what we did is we dragged them into court in D.C., kicking and screaming, and we said, okay, if you won't come over here and do this properly, we'll drag you over here and we'll make you talk about it. So where we are is that there's a lawsuit in D.C. that's not going to be dispositive on the outcome of this dispute, which is really in the hands of Congress and the states. So Ofcom continues to send their letters, and we continue to use those letters as political ammunition here in the United States to agitate for legislative reform.
And they argue that they're protected by sovereign immunity. Is that right? So what does that mean? How are they counteracting this?
I don't want to get into too much nitty gritty on the litigation because it's still live.
Yep.
But we've asserted that they're not entitled to sovereign immunity. They are. They've asserted that they are. They'll make their arguments. We'll make, as they're entitled to do. We'll make our arguments as we're entitled to do. I think politically, it's certainly interesting that Ofcom, which purports to be an independent regulator and all this jazz, comes over to America and says, the First Amendment doesn't protect your clients and doesn't protect Americans from us, but it certainly protects us from Americans, right? The U.S. Constitution protects us, but it doesn't protect you. And so really there's a lesson for our politicians there. I think our politicians have received the message. But as to the litigation itself, they'll make their arguments, we'll make our arguments, and we'll see, the federal courts are plenty backed up. after the government shutdown. So maybe a judge will rule on it in 6 months.
And the Online Safety Act, I mean, this is just killing free speech in the UK, right? What are your thoughts on this overall? I can guess what you're going to say, but
How do you mean?
What are you feeling over in the US? Are you guys looking at this act with aghast and thinking the British have gone mad?
We're gonna when we're done fortifying our own perimeter, we're gonna come over to England and we're gonna sort that out too. There are forces in both the conservative and reform movements that are looking very seriously at reforming UK free speech law, and those are the guys who really need to be the standard bearers. I've written some proposals, but there are lots of free speech activists, and I think there's a new, really resurgence of traditional civil libertarian thinking in both of those parties. Which I think once Labor's out of power, right? It can't come too soon, but I think once they're out of power,
Yeah.
I think we're going to see some significant free speech reform, regardless of who's elected, unless the Greens get in which case, just get out of the country.
Yeah, we're all in trouble then, aren't we?
Yeah,
So
well, we're all in
comes
trouble.
next? What comes next in the battle?
So the battle really, what I think Ofcom in London don't get, and I think hopefully they will get it after this conversation, is that the venue moved from London to Washington D.C. in July. So Peter Kyle ran around. He did this big national TV push. He went on Newsnight and said, "We have the power to shut down any platform." And I made sure that my buddies in the federal government saw that, and that really steeled our resolve, right, in the targets of the UK and of Ofcom to prove them wrong and say, no, you don't have the power to shut down an American platform. So what comes next? We've introduced a bill, or not introduced, we've filed, a state legislator has filed a bill in Wyoming, which I like to it's called the Granite Act. Granite, as in the rock, that stands for Guaranteeing Rights Against Novel International Tyranny and Extortion. So it's a fun little acronym. And that is what I call it's a pro-free speech Death Star of a law. What it does is it says that U.S. it's a Death Star. So if we enact this in the United States, and even really in only one state, it'll be very, very damaging to the OSA. But if we get federal companion legislation, then it'll be fatal to the OSA. And what that does is it says that U.S. state entities and government entities can't cooperate with censorship requests, that those censorship demands are not enforceable on U.S. soil, and critically, that sovereign immunity is stripped for any foreign entity, state, agency, or individual, and they are jointly and severally liable for titanic quantities of damages if they attempt to send one of these censorship notices in the United States. The draft that has been filed says that it's either treble actual damages, the greater of treble actual damages, $10 million per threat. So in 4chan's case, 6 letters, 6 threats, $60 million, or treble the quantity of the maximum fine. So in Facebook's case, for example, Meta, if they communicated a 10% global revenue fine, their global revenues are $164 billion. So that would be a 30% fine, which is about $49 billion in damages, which is roughly equal to the amount of sovereign assets the United Kingdom holds in American banks. So if they want to toy with that, if we can get something like that enacted, the Granite Act, at state level, it'll be very, very damaging because companies will be able to reincorporate in that state and then raise the shield. But if we get federal action on this as well, and we're optimistic that the states leading this effort will prompt federal action, although there certainly hasn't been any federal action yet. If we can do that, then it's over, right? And we're not just, to be clear about what our objective is here, we're not simply saying, oh no, our position is that Americans don't have to comply with the Online Safety Act, and we will allow this conduct to continue. The objective of what we have been doing for the last 6 months is the complete and utter destruction of the Online Safety Act as an instrument of British government policy, able to harm Americans. And we want to take that ability away. And the way we take it away is by enacting very clear and express censorship shields, and by ensuring that any country, Australia, UK, Singapore, New Zealand, Canada, France, Belgium, Germany, whoever, that attempts this in future will not be able to touch the U.S. financial system without risking a major asset seizure order, right? They've been running around threatening us with fines and asset seizures. Okay, now it's our turn.
All right, so is the Death Star laser, is that going to tilt and pivot towards Ofcom itself? You're going to blast through the Online Safety Act, but Ofcom themselves, are you coming for them as well?
So the Death Star laser is expressed to apply jointly and severally to the foreign state, any agency which carries out the censorship on behalf of the foreign state, and any individual working at that agency who collaborates with it. So it's a joint and several liability term. It's not specifically targeting Ofcom, right? It's specifically targeting, in future, we don't do ex post facto law in the United States, unlike the UK, which can do retroactive law under its constitution. But in the U.S., we aren't allowed to do that. So the idea would be whatever Ofcom's done to date, that's water under the bridge. But going forward, right, we want to erect a shield, and if you try to get through that shield, the laser is going to be pointed at you, and you're not going to need to wait for the State Department, and you're not going to need to wait for the Congress or anything else. We want to put that laser in the hands of the most powerful force on earth, apart from compound interest, the American plaintiffs bar, and so the American trial lawyers. And we think that would be a very significant deterrent to any future censorship inbound to the United States. So this law is, if it has not been introduced in Wyoming, or not introduced, filed, obviously there's a whole process that the bill would need to go through. It'd need to make it through committee. It'd need to get introduced. It's been filed or will be filed very shortly in Wyoming. Currently waiting for confirmation on that. We are moving towards filing an identical bill in the state of New Hampshire. Copies of that legislation have been provided to the relevant staffers in various federal agencies for their consideration, and we're hoping that the rapid movement of state action to do this. And we've got all kinds of censorship problems. They've just tried to hail Julie Inman Grant before Congress to testify by December the 2nd. So there are a lot of different censorship regimes, and our objective has always been this entire time the complete and total destruction of them all. And I think with filing bills like this, we're well on our way to accomplishing that.
What's the mood, I wonder? I haven't seen too much agitation from the White House over this. I mean, you see Starmer and Trump appear to have a kind of cozy-ish transactional relationship, but do you see this becoming a bigger problem and it getting on the White House's radar at any point, particularly as you escalate this action?
I know nothing other than what has been reported in outlets like the Daily Telegraph. I barely even know the White House exists. I couldn't even find it on a map. So I know nothing other than what's been publicly reported. What has been publicly reported is that they were. I mean, and I can understand why. Apparently, this is a massive trade headache with Europe. There was Cloudflare, which runs the entire internet, as anyone who tried to use Wix yesterday found out. Wrote a really compelling letter to the U.S. Trade Representative, which is an executive office agency. And they explained all the problems they've got with various censorship regimes from all around the world, basically trying to meddle with their business and what a compliance headache it is, and how things used to be so much better when America just was the hyperpower and everyone stopped trying to regulate us. So I think there's a lot of appetite, certainly from industry in the United States. There's appetite from individuals in the United States who were censored under the Biden administration. The reporting has indicated that the White House certainly regards this as a primary concern. And, part of the thing we're doing with the states is we're trying to give the White House some options, right? Demonstrate. Listen, there's an option that takes this off your plate, right? And just lets American trial lawyers handle it. So if the Europeans complain about it, it's like, oh, we're really sorry. All those crazy, sons of guns in Congress enacted the silly rule, and you got to go deal with Quinn Emanuel now. Anytime you want to serve a censorship notice on X, we're really sorry, but, we can't. Those pesky lawyers, we don't like them either. Right? President Trump really doesn't like him. Elon doesn't like him, etc. That kind of jazz. But we're trying to create an option here for the government to get this issue off its plate, so they can focus on the business of making America great again.
Lovely. Well, Preston, best of luck to you. Thanks for joining us on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.